Well, welcome everyone. I'm Rick Maurer, and I am delighted to be talking today to Dr. Paul White. Paul and I met at the Copenhagen Change Day, the first one they ever had. We were both keynote speakers. I think it was in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. And I really liked what he had to say about relationships at work and appreciation. And I could tell the people in the audience really appreciated it. And then we had the opportunity to sit together at dinner and started to form this friendship, and so we've done a couple podcasts over the years. We've stayed in touch, keeping in touch with what each other is up to. So I'm very excited about Paul's new book, which is Making Things Right at Work, which we'll get to in a minute. But Paul, first of all, welcome, and would you mind saying a few things just about you so people know who you are?
Sure, Rick, thanks. Good to be with you again. So I'm a psychologist by training. I grew up in the Midwest, outside of Kansas City, in the context of a family-owned business, and that sort of helped lead my path this way. For a number of years, I consulted with family-owned businesses dealing with the family issues intertwined with working together, and especially business succession planning, and learned a lot that way. And in the midst of that, was working with a company in North Carolina, and talking to the dad, said, how's the training going or succession going? He says, it's fine. My son's stepping up. Go across the hall, talk to the son, ask him the same question. He says, this is a disaster. It's never going to work. I can't please my dad. And so I was aware of the 5 love languages written by Dr. Gary Chapman, which deals with personal relationships. And so I pursued him and sort of convinced him for us to work together on applying that to work-based relationships, and then have been doing that for a number of years. Turned out the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace and assessment and training. And so sort of been doing that and really focusing on workplace relationships. That's really been the focus of my work.
Great, that's terrific. And by the way, I really I'm saying to the viewers now, I really highly recommend Paul's work. He really, what I like about it, and I got first through the appreciation, showing appreciation at work, is that there's, in Yogi Berra's terms, there's deep depth there. There's really solid stuff, but you put it across in a way that I imagine lots of people, including me, can go, oh, I could do that. Oh, that's worth, and I really like that a lot.
Well, thank you.
So I'm going to read the full title to people because I was saying to Paul before we went live, what I really like about the title is it tells us exactly what it is. It's not cute in any way. It's just, it's there, and I really appreciate that. Making things right at work, increase teamwork, resolve conflict, and build trust. So my guess is that given your work with relationships and people at work, that you're noticing that things aren't quite right at work. And so what were you noticing that seemed to be missing?
Well, what's interesting, and especially even since the book has been released, is when I talk to people about it, they say, oh, yeah, we need that so bad, and it's interesting that, conflict at work is not one of those things, hopefully, that we don't live with just day in, day out forever, but it's one of those issues that comes up occasionally, whether it's conflict between you and a colleague or supervisor, or that you're managing people who are in conflict and you're trying to figure out how to keep this from destroying your team, or what your role should be. And so unfortunately it's a common experience for, I think, almost all of us have had some kind of issue. And so yeah, I often say psychologists are people who get to charge you a lot of money to teach you the same thing that your mom and your grandma taught you if you would have listened. So it's sort of pretty simplistic. We major in the obvious sometimes, but it's helpful to frame it in some ways that can be implemented, and that's been the goal. So the book, we talk about where conflict comes from, what it actually looks like, because it looks different ways in different settings. What do you do when you messed up? And how do you get past being hurt and angry when somebody's offended you? And then how do you rebuild trust? So it's just sort of, some practical steps that way. As I was thinking about it in your work, Rick, with change management, an issue, how you continue to learn stuff even after you've written a book, right? As you talk and interact. And it's occurred to me how important expectations are. That conflict often is the result of different expectations and perspectives, either personal background, professional, whatever. And as you know, I mean, when you're dealing with change in an organization, expectations are huge, and how to how to manage those and deliver those. And so that's just been a really interesting thing. Most conflict seems to come from miscommunication. I thought you were going to call them. No, I thought you were going to call them, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then at a next level, sort of misattributing intent, and often sort of malintent, that if your team just pulled off an event and you have sort of a review in a committee meeting and somebody says, well, how can we make that go better? If you were in charge, you might say, they're trying to throw me under the bus here, when in actuality, they may just be saying, how can we make this go better? That they want to improve it. And so lots of times we read into others' actions, motives that maybe aren't there.
Yeah, good, great. So what I would like to do, and why, well, there are two reasons why I wanted to talk with you. One is I wanted to get to talk with you again, because we haven't talked in a
Thank
while.
you.
And the second thing is this new book in particular, there is a real connection with the work that I'm doing. And what I developed like 25 years ago, and it's still the foundation of my work, is so why do people support us? Why do they resist us? And I came up with these three levels. And level one has to do with facts and figures. They understand it. Level two is an emotional fear, generally, or excitement. But the third one is what really prompted me to want to do this call with you, and that is trust or lack of trust. People saying, hey, I don't trust you. And that's a huge deal in changes. I mean, I've seen leaders who at that level one don't really have the facts and figures together yet. People don't quite know what's going to happen. Like, it could be scary, but they do it because they trust the leader. And as long as that leader doesn't betray the trust, it's just that fundamental. So I would love, kind of in the context of influencing people at work and change, any of that, for you to talk about that issue of trust and then building it or rebuilding it.
Yeah. It permeates so many aspects of our workplace relationships. One of the things that I have found over time is that the way we talk about trust in our culture really creates some problems, because we talk about, I either trust them or I don't, and it's sort of in a black and white or nothing kind of way. And really it exists on a continuum, right? I mean, you may not trust them fully, but you sort of think they might be able to do it. And secondly, maybe even more importantly, is that trust is situation specific, right? Let's say if I'm coming to DC to visit and we, arrange to get together, and turns out you're going to pick me up at the airport, I can trust you to do that, manage that, whatever. But I'm not going to trust you to do open heart surgery on me. It's because trust, it has trust for what? In fact, I just recently saw a survey put out by a major corporation indicating, high levels of trust for management from their team members. But it was just trust. It was like, well, trust for what, or to do what? I mean, it really seemed meaningless to me. And so I really encourage people to talk about, I'm having a hard time, so at least, soften it a little bit, trusting Jim to be able to do this project totally on their own, or whatever. And what we found, and there's lots of different models of trust, but the one that I found really helpful, sort of a three-legged stool of what we call 3 C's. One is competence. Do they have the ability to do the task? And if not, either get them some training or bring somebody else who can. Secondly is consistency. They can do it, but do they actually do it? Do they do it on time? It's sort of like, hiring maybe somebody to come work on your house or your apartment. We've all had that experience where they're good, but they don't show up, right? And so that doesn't help. And then third is character, and character meaning, both integrity, but also do they consider my interest as well as their own? And I think clearly in change, that's huge. That, it's like, are they thinking about the rest of us and how this impacts us, or are they just looking at the bottom line or whatever is, motivating the change? So I just find that it's helpful to break trust down to help people say, what area is it that you don't think they can do it? They haven't been consistent, or character, because that then leads you to sort of a problem solving model of, they haven't been consistent. So instead of checking on them once a month, we're going to set up a touch point once a week to see how they are along the way. And it just helps get unstuck, because the flip side of it is, if somebody says, well, I don't trust them, what do you do with that? I mean, that's just sort of a judgment, and where do you go with that? And so providing, being able to develop an action plan, and it goes both ways, both trusting them, and when you feel lack of trust from others, say, I'm having a sense that you're sort of reluctant about handing this off to me. What is it about that? Is it, do you think, I don't know this program, or I haven't been, really reliable in getting my work done the way you want, or you think it's all about me, so I just think it's a helpful concept that, really helps build teams, obviously sort of one-on-one over time.
Wow, cool. I'm going to use a visual aid here. This is not the one to take a pause. This is actual visual aid that I think speaks to that. Let me tell the story, and then you can tell me if it seems apt or not. I was invited to give a speech to the finance department in a very large company, and wasn't working on change and resistance back then, so I was just giving a speech on management. And what I didn't realize is the head of the organization had instituted this change plan to get workers involved in decision making, and he left supervisors and managers out of that conversation. Wow. And so, yeah, so you can imagine that didn't go over well. And so and that was still kind of roiling around in the room. And what he did is, prior to the meeting, he went to all the offices and he took some index cards, blank cards, and just said, hey, I'll keep it anonymous, but write down any questions or concerns that you have, because I'd like to address them at the meeting. So first of all, that was a really good move. The second good move is he said, and get it to my office a couple days before the meeting. So what I liked about that is that if he was going to go ballistic, like, what, how dare they say it? He's got 2 days
right.
to calm down. And then the third thing he did brilliant. He got up in front of people. Now, he could have easily put this information on slides and go, well, there are 5 key points, blah, blah, blah. He didn't. He came in with a stack of index cards. So it seemed pretty clear he's got actually what they said.
Yeah.
So somebody might say, hey, I forget his name. I'll say, Fred, you quite often you come up with an idea, you're enthusiastic about it, and then everything just drops away after a few months. Mm-hmm. And what he would do is sometimes say, you're absolutely right. Here's what I'm going to do. In fact, here's what this prompts me to actually be honest and say, okay, here's what you're going to see by next week. And he
right.
So as he's going through the cards, you can see, I'm just sitting over the side of the room, people are kind of leaning forward, and then everything had been anonymous up to this point. People started raising their hands and going, but Fred, what about this? So now in a group of 100 people, there's a conversation going on.
Nice.
And I thought it was beautiful. At any rate, I would love your reaction.
Well, I think it ties into the issue about conflict. And one thing I've become aware of is a lot of people don't think in terms of conflict necessarily. I'm not really in conflict, but they note tension, right? There's tension in the relationship or in the office. And, they feel like they have to walk on eggshells and that kind of thing. And so, it's sort of a matter of degree. But in dealing with conflict or tension, a first step is, first of all, to say, I'm aware that there seems to be some tension here, and to think about, what your role may be and admit to that, and start with an I statement, right? I mean, it's like, I'm sorry that I really didn't communicate as clearly as I should have, prior to the meeting or whatever. So it's not, I'm sorry that you feel offended because then it puts it on them, but something that you really can own. And it doesn't have to mean that you're admitting that you made a mistake, because maybe you didn't. Sometimes conflict is not about somebody doing something wrong. It's just misperception. But we can look at the result and realize, I don't want that result. I'm sorry that we're having a hard time communicating, or whatever it might be. And then, and then if it fits, to admit some responsibility, say, I sort of screwed up here. I didn't include you in the email that I should have, or I shouldn't have said that in front of other people. And then lots of times that just sort of, loosens the tension. It lets the air out of the balloon where you feel like it's going to pop, and then you can talk, right? And there's other steps as well. But, that's just a nice starting point, that if we start with ourselves, try to pay attention to what's going on, And, almost all of us, our initial reaction is, well, they're, oversensitive, or they're overreacting, or they did this. Yeah, probably. But, what are you going to do about it? So just start with what you can do for
No,
yourself.
no, that's terrific. I like that. So, well, actually, there's something I wanted to add to that. I like that advice a lot. I've given it. I've tried to follow that advice. But something that I see happen with leaders sometimes is that they start with the the apology or the mea culpa and say, I realize that I wasn't clear, blah 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 blah, and and that would be a great place to stop. To say,
Yes, it
I'm
would.
really sorry, but they don't.
No, they don't.
They
Or
go
we
for
don't.
another 10 minutes, and it's like
Yeah.
you're not on a campaign. Just say I'm sorry. Here's what I'm going to do in the future. I will never sin again, or whatever, and then
Yeah,
just keep
right.
moving. But I've been on projects where the person who's going to take responsibility for our team where we messed up, he listens to people and says, "Well, here's how you're wrong." And
Mhm.
I'm going, "Oh no!" And
Right.
it just the next 6 weeks with this client, we were in out of the country working as a team. It just they didn't trust. Every time we gave them an activity, they go, "Huh? I wonder what's really behind this."
Ah, there you go.
What do you
Yeah.
mean lunch break? What do you mean by It just just amazing.
Yeah. That three-letter word of BUT, when we do the I'm sorry, or I shouldn't have, but, and then
Yes.
we go on, it just totally undermines the good that maybe would have occurred if we had stopped. And I think, part of it is looking at the microcosm of this situation, um, and then looking at the bigger picture. If you try to keep the bigger picture in mind, I'm really trying to build a trusting uh, team that works together well over time. And is it that important that I point out this one thing that they didn't do in this situation? Probably not. It's probably better to let it go and keep the bigger picture of moving towards the positive direction. So,
Super good. Let me ask a variation on that because when I'm looking at that lack of trust, and I agree with you completely, it's lack of trust in regard to whatever it is.
yes.
Sometimes it's not the relationship between you and me, it's who I represent.
Mm,
Hi, I'm from headquarters, I'm here to help. Or, hi, I'm a consultant from the United States of America. Things like that. So, any advice for people when the lack of trust or diminished trust isn't of their making?
yeah. Well, my belief is that we have relationships with other people. We don't really have much of a relationship with organizations or some larger entity. And a relationship with a person will supersede a relationship with an organization. That's why I talk to people, you know, employees aren't, loyal to an organization very much. They're loyal to the people with whom they work or who trained them or who brought them on. And so I guess I would say, don't try to fix their perception about the United States if you're working in Europe or wherever,
Right.
or if it's management, try to build the relationship one-on-one with them.
Hmm.
And you probably or at least have the potential to get past that and help them pass that. And sometimes we're in a situation, right, where it's like, you're right, they screwed up on this. I mean, it's just like, man, that was not wise to do. But they really do mean well here, and they're trying to do the right thing here. So let's try to work on this. Because sometimes you're in between when you're representing something that you know you didn't agree with how they did it. But I guess focusing on the person, and that's what we talk about in appreciation, the difference between authentic appreciation and employee recognition. Employee recognition is pretty organizational, it's top down, it's fine, it's good about performance, but really appreciation is about the other person and that we value who they are, not just what they do. And that actually gives us a depth and a breadth of characteristics that we can focus on that aren't work related, because you can appreciate and value that somebody's training for a half marathon, saying, "Man, that's cool that you got the discipline to do that," or a single mom who's really committed to her kids, and you say, "Man, I just see how much you love your kids and you're there for." It's not about work necessarily, but it's a connectedness, a valuing, and then it sort of, seeps into the workplace as well.
Super. I like that a lot. Good. Um, a story came to mind. Never even thought about it when I was preparing for our conversation, but I think it might be appropriate. And if it's not, we'll just cut it out. Um, the, uh, had the opportunity to interview former Senator George Mitchell, and he did a lot of negotiations around the world in hotspots, and he helped negotiate the Good Friday Accords with Britain and Northern Ireland. And what I was curious about is, how did you do that? Not what techniques did you use? How did you stay calm for that? Because in his book, he said he got up in front of them, and they said, by the way, the Northern Ireland factions had no say in who was going to be the negotiator for this.
Oh, well.
Bad choice. But
Right.
so he gets up. So he's introduced by some dignitary, and so he's from the United States, and the head of the guy whose name was Ian Paisley. I think it was called the Democratic Unionists. I'm not positive. I may have it wrong, but at any rate, it was a very strong group in Ireland. He stood up and looked at Senator Mitchell and said, "No, no, no." Then he and his contingent walked out of the room.
Wow.
So what they did is they said, Senator, why don't you go over to that other room and we'll talk and decide whether, we want to go ahead with you. And so so he's in the other room and he's listening, I think for a day, as they talk about him and who he represented. And they're not saying nice things.
Right.
So for me, I would think, man, you would the thought that you're actually going to handle that well after you're accepted just was amazing. And what I was curious about, how did you do that? And he said,
Yeah.
he said, I worked in politics. And he said, people take stances. He said, you do not take that stuff personally.
Hmm.
I would not have been successful. So I love that his mindset on this was, okay, yeah, there's going to be tension, and I may be the highest point standing there, and so then he handled it, and the accords went off. I mean, those meetings, I suspect that were not without incident, but they went off well. They actually were.
Hmm.
But I like the fact that he could just separate himself from all the emotion roiling around.
Well, and part of that, at least where it leads me, and maybe taking it to a workplace where you're a supervisor and you've got two groups that are upset with each other, whatever, is one, he had to have a sense of comfort with himself that this may not go well and it may look like a failure, but that didn't create his anxiety about that I'm a failure, that this reflects on me. It's like it's their issue, and I'm here to be a tool and a conduit. But so often, we get our personal identity or worth tied up into how things are going. And you have two people that don't like each other, don't get along. It's like, I'm not God. I can't make this happen. I'm willing to try and give you some choices and we'll see where it goes. And sort of having that a little bit of disconnectedness personally while staying personally connected, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
that you're relating to them and, potentially hearing or even affirming or at least acknowledging their concerns and why they feel like you're biased or whatever. I mean, that's a helpful step. So I think for me, at least, and in fact, I even had a situation yesterday. I was doing some business consulting and it's like, I'm not sure it's going to go well. I'm going to give them the options and tell them what I think they are and where they potentially might land and let them choose. And we'll see. And it's doesn't mean lots of times as a therapist or even a consultant, you feel like you've got to solve things when, it's just not in the cards, right?
Yeah. Wow. This is great, and I'm going to wrap it up now. I don't really want to wrap it up, but I'm going to wrap it up right now.
That's fine.
And if we get a lot of responses when I post this, I will call again and say, hey, could we pick up on this? Could we pick up on that? Well,
Sure.
you can always say no or yes, whatever you want. So, first of all, I'd like people to know how they can get your book, and I will post any information you give me on the final slide that will go on our call right
Sure.
now. but I really
Sure.
like this book.
Oh, thanks, Rick. So it's available on Amazon. All of our materials are on our website called appreciationatwork.com, and it's the word at, so appreciationatwork.com. And there's information about the 5 languages of appreciation, this book about toxic workplaces. And so that's sort of the mother webship that people can go to.
Okay, and so if somebody wanted to contact you for, by the way, Paul is a great speaker. Just put that
Oh,
out.
thank
So
you.
wanted to contact you to do actual work. Would they get you through Appreciation at Work? That website?
Let me give you a different email that will get it straight to me. I set up an email. It's called Yes, Dr. Paul. So just YESDRPAUL @gmail.com. And just put like Rick Maurer podcast in the subject line, and then just ping me. And that won't have to go through the layers to get to me. And I'd be glad to respond.
Wow, this is terrific. Thank you so much, Paul.
You bet. Thanks for the opportunity.